This podcast and every other podcast I make is supported by Patreon. They got this episode a little bit early, plus an extended cut. There's like an extra 2 minutes of us just babbling at the start that they got access to. So if you want to support the show and help us make more cool stuff, including more animated episodes, which is mostly the goal, please consider helping out at patreon.com/CharLanazard.
The Last of Us TV show reviews went up this morning.
They're good, right?
They did
They
at midnight.
Very good. People.
Excellent.
It had 100% for a very long time.
Who gave it something less than 10? Let's focus the podcast on them for an hour. Come
Well,
on.
one of the criticisms was one that's like almost unfair, which was, well, I still think the game's better.
Oh,
like, is
fair
that, you know, is
This
that
is-
a reason to
That might
take a
have
point
been
off?
me. Was that me? That might have
that
been
was
me.
you.
That might have been me.
So,
oh boy, Troy's
I'm
not
gonna,
in it.
I'm going to flex super hard. So I was with Neil last night at 12:01. We were sitting on this couch kind of back in the back area. Of
That's the flex? You have a couch?
Well done. That's amazing. That's the level of success the audience can dream of. If you
couch
become a big
alone.
actor like Troy, you
One
too
day,
can have a couch.
You too can have a canapé.
It's that HBO
we were at
money finally kick again.
Yeah. It was the Last of Us premiere last night. And so we had a wonderful night, and we got to watch it not only with all of the majority of the crew, most of the cast, and a lot of course the Mucky Mucks and our betters at HBO, but also they had like 130 fans that they opened the doors to, and we're like, we're here because of you. We want to celebrate this with you. It doesn't feel right to do it without you. So there was a huge contingent of people that were just there as fans watching, and to hear them react to everything, to hear, because I've only been watching it so far on like my iPad, and like not even final VFX. A lot of it hasn't been mixed. There's ADR that's missing. It's like maybe 60 to 70% complete, but all of the material's there, but just not finalized or polished. And I've every episode, good God, I've been blown away. But to see it on that huge of a screen with an audience and hear the gasps, hear the crying, hear the laughs, it was infectious. If you're a part of the
you
pun.
only watched the first
That's a good
episode
pun. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
at the premiere?
Thank you. The first episode is a really long episode. I think it's like 72 minutes,
Whoa.
maybe a little bit long. It was actually originally 2 episodes, and they ended up cutting it into one big episode. There's a lot of onboarding that happens with the first episode, and then we're into the world, we're into the characters, we're into the story, and that's where it just starts to go. I mean, it takes off. Episode 3, I keep telling people, you get to episode 3, you're done. Like, we own you. It is one of the most original, compelling, beautiful, tragic, heartbreaking episodes so far of the entire series. But we're sitting there at 12:01, and Neil looks at me. We're kind of like, the party started to wind down. We've had this incredible night, and just looking at each other going, I can't believe we're here, and all the people that were there, and how much they've enjoyed watching it and being a part of this, and this new influx of people, and now this 10-year tenure of other people who have been with us for so long. And he just goes, review scores are up. You want to look at it? I was like, let's do it. And it was just seeing them roll in real time. And I was like, holy shit, man, you got to hit.
And that never happens for video game adaptations.
No.
It's like
great.
a curse, you know? Like
What is it? Arcane?
I mean,
the
Arcane
only
is brilliant.
mega
Cyberpunk, sort of,
that's-
but that's more of a TTRPG.
Witcher, but is that more the book than the game? Yeah. But
It's
yeah,
a
no.
little muddy. Like I think
Yeah.
Witcher did a fantastic job of adapting something that was primarily known for being in that video game space.
Yeah.
But that they also really there's quite a bit of divergence with both of those things. Too, Arcane really can't say that it's a true adaptation.
This is
It
like a very
something new.
direct down the line.
Yeah.
That's fair. Arcane is not really an adaptation.
No, it's just
It's
kind of
expansion,
like
right?
League
It's
light,
Yeah.
League adjacent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's I'm really excited about it. Like, I keep having this thing where, you know, so many video game adaptations are not great, and I've been let down so many times, but the trailers look so good in a way that I don't feel like I'm being pandered to as a fan. I feel like I'm being reassured. And I think that's a really specific marketing approach of, hey, we're telling you that we're not going to screw this up. Not, did you like that reference? Like, they're very, very different tones.
They're even going further,
like
right? They're showing rather than telling with that. They're kind of putting it all out there and kind of, yeah, I like that.
In the same way that I think Andor, there were a lot of calls that happened across Disney.
I also really enjoyed Andor.
But I think what that did was, besides just being a great show, it showed.
Can we legally do this without Austin here?
Oh, I know.
This is segue to Star Wars.
He's going to come in so hot.
We are here. Does the audience know if we said this? We are here because Austin.
Yeah, Austin was like, hey, everybody, need to start a bit early today. I actually think it's right that we disrespect him by talking about Andor.
Yeah, that's what he gets. Jesus. But what Andor did was it said, hey, if you make a show like this, people will respond to it. And I heard someone say this last night, it's not fan service, it's story service. And if you service the story as opposed to, and focus on that as opposed to trying to service your fans, then I think you end up making a better product. And that's what they did. There's such a passionate love with Craig. There is incredible connection and oversight with Neil. And then both of them are two of the greatest writers in Hollywood right now. I mean, they're insane. So if you put that together and then you continue to build upon that with an incredible cast, the cinematography is incredible. One of the best production designers I've ever seen. It's stupid. So like Craig Mazin puts it best. He goes, I cheated. I started with the best story. There's a lot of people that start with a really not that great of a story. Good premise, but not necessarily like, Assassin's Creed, amazing premise, but starts to get very muddy very quickly.
Yeah.
Because they've had to just
I actually somewhat often have friends who work in film and TV come to me and are like, hey, this video game license, do you think that we can do it? Or like, what do you think of the story in this game? Someone has approached me for this, whatever. That happens to me pretty often. And I even have certain people who work in development in TV who I will play games for because they aren't gamers. So I'm like, sure, come over. I'll play through this for you so you understand it. I would say 90% of the time they end up going, we can't do this. It's not going to work.
We can't do it.
The story's
like, here's a question I had last night. Inside, could you see, I'm thinking about like truly successful, influential, it would ruin it, right? It would like somehow retroactively ruin the game.
No, it wouldn't make any sense. Yeah, I do think that that's definitely one that you experience the story by participating in it. Whereas I feel like The Last of Us, obviously that happens too. But even that opening, like you show somebody the opening of The Last of Us and they're going to be like, oh yeah, we could do this. Oh, I'm crying. Oh, well, great.
It's very like cinematic-y.
Yeah.
Like Last of Us plays like a HBO show to start off with, right? Like to a degree. There's a lot of, and I mean that as a compliment. Like it plays as peak TV.
Yeah, the structure.
So it makes perfect sense. And I think a lot of Sony, honestly, a lot of Sony first party stuff, was included, like makes sense for that. So I can see. But
here's where most people mess up. They try to make video games into movies and movies into video games, and that's
hate it when people try and make movies into video games.
Don't do it.
Lazy.
It doesn't. It's very, very lazy. Remember, this is it. What does a video game look like when can you still make it compelling if you remove the video game element? And that to me is the real trick. Is most people try to, again, like you said, Alanah, pander to the audience. It's like, don't just tell a good story, and if it's a good enough story, it'll hold up in any medium. But I'm very curious. Like people were talking about. Now there's the buzz about the BioShock movie, which I guess I could see that if they go Rapture, I could see that being done in 2 hours.
But then what? Like, so the thing about BioShock is it's Rapture, it's Ayn Rand, it's a very like specific political landscape that you inhabit through a story that is told specifically through gameplay. Like the twist of BioShock is you were doing this because you were told to the whole time.
Well, my big thing is, who do you cast as Andrew Ryan?
But what does Andrew Ryan even do in a movie version of that game? Like, it
would be retroactively adding stuff to it.
Knives Out Rapture.
Oh.
not bad. But that said, Mike, I think you could say Knives Out anything, and I'd be like, you know what?
Yeah. No, that's honestly
Compelling.
again.
If you could put together a script, we'd be interested in hearing
Coming
more
from the
about those.
Hitman guy, like you're like, yeah, we could make that into anything. I don't know what a Bioshock movie looks like because I think that Bioshock at its core is so rich because it's a video game. I don't doubt someone could do it, but I don't know what it looks like.
I think Ken Levine does a great job of building out worlds and also introducing us to characters. So there's my thing is, do I want to spend more time in there as somebody else because I've already done it as me, and that to me is what I think there's. That's
When you're literally book a DeWitt, it's kind of cheating.
Like, this guy sounds familiar.
Yeah, you sure have, but I
know what you mean though. It's like if I've already there's oh god, I forget who I'm quoting, but it's the old adage of the old adage of like, if this isn't the most interesting moment in this character's life and this isn't the most interesting character, then don't tell the story. And I think that if games have already, if the game of Bioshock has told you the most interesting events of Bioshock through the most interesting eyes to see those events through, then there is a compelling thing of like, where would you find the next thing? And that doesn't mean that's not necessarily a barrier. You can find a better story, but like that's why Last of Us makes sense or The Witcher makes sense. Is they stuck with the same protagonist and they've told a similar or adjacent story, or I don't know how close it is with Last of Us, but like from the trailer, it looks like it's following a lot of the same beats and structure, right? So that makes sense, but also the world building is an angle in, and that's, as you say, like a well-built world can be the chessboard that you can put a Knives Out in. When you say like, oh, put Knives Out in and that kind of works in anything, Knives Out is a structure, a story framework you can place into a pre-existing world. So it works in the context of you could take Knives Out in Star Wars. That sounds cool. Game storytelling, I think it was it something that came up when I was talking with, I think was it a Nintendo? I think it was a conversation I was with some Nintendo designers years ago, where they basically were talking about the idea of scenario and why that exists in kind of Japanese game development, and this idea of
explain. Sorry,
the idea of story being something, story and theming, and how those things are separated essentially. And it's not an original thing. It's been thought about many times, but like theming would be Star Wars universe. That's a cool place to be. It's a place you want to visit. It's a place rich with potential for stories. But the story would be, and there's this kid who's always dreamt of being a fighter pilot, right? And those two things, you can take one and put it into the other. And with games, often the kind of the story, the thing you're going to end up, the protagonist's arc you're going to be telling is very straightforward. It's, Kratos needs to go and punch a lot of things, right? That's your framework that you're working within, and games excel at world building around that and going, well, we're going to wrap it in all of these things. And I would say Kratos is an example of like where it's been around long enough that actually the protagonist story is also becoming rich and good and cool. It's a bad example of I guess Doom would be a better example of like the protagonist is doing their thing, but the framework around them is what is compelling. And I guess my point is with Bioshock, you've got that world. Tell a million stories in that world. It would be interesting to see Rapture at its height, right? It would be interesting to see the fall of Rapture. It would be interesting to see a movie that kind of went to a completely different moment in that time, or follows a young Andy Ryan who's building it.
You guys are on nickname terms, are you? Your mates, so you call him.
Well, he's young. He's
Andy,
young, so he's Andy Ryan. Young Andy Ryan.
You don't call him Andy?
I guess you're right. That the protagonist of Bioshock is not interesting. Frankly, I don't remember the name of the protagonist of Bioshock 1.
I would struggle to.
Jack, you're right. Jack. That's it, though. I don't really remember that much about him outside of that. I mean, you could make a very interesting case for the fall of Rapture being a sort of apocalyptic... again, my thing with Bioshock is I'm always like, that world is very cool. I don't doubt somebody can do it. Why, though?
And I guess is the thing, right?
I felt the same way about The Last of Us, though, as well. That I was like, I think this is one of the best stories in video games ever. I think it's brilliant and it's perfect. And why? But now I'm like, you know what? maybe I will take a little bit more of that because it looks so good. So I guess the part of the marketing has to be proving the why, because it doesn't seem like it's dramatically different.
But that's the truth of pitching anything, especially at like a high level.
Why?
The why is the pitch.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that if part of the pitch is because this one was successful,
that's a failed pitch.
It's a failed pitch. I think it's going to be a very popular one. I think there's a lot for people to go, well, this is what they did. Like, I remember there was a game we were working on when Uncharted was just hitting all the marks. It was getting all the awards. And there was the directors were even saying, we want to do it the Naughty Dog way. I was like, no, you don't want to do it the Naughty Dog way because you're not doing it the Naughty Dog way. You're trying to get the Naughty Dog awards. And there's a difference. The reason why you get those accolades, the reason why you get those review scores, the reason why you get those sales, and more than anything, the impact of people going, fuck, this is a great game, is because of all the process. You can't shortcut your way to that and say that, well, we're doing it cinematically. I think that even games fail to do the things that the movies adaptation or the TV adaptations are trying to do as well, where they are trying to adapt another story into theirs and make the same mistakes that TV shows do.
The best pitches are something which is just a complete swing away and something original. Originality still remains like the most successful way of pitching. Or like in the case of like Tron, yes, this is a franchise, but I went to Disney with like a 2-sentence, here's my angle on Tron, and I don't think anyone's done this before, and I think it's interesting. And that's ultimately like the fact that I had evidence that I could do it, the fact that I had a team, the fact that I had other games and successes or whatever was great, but I sold them with like an emotional kind of, here's a story you've not heard before.
What if it's aliens?
What if it's aliens?
What if it's aliens?
I watched Sicario for the first time the other night.
What'd you think?
Brilliant. Loved it. Adored it, even. And it's that one, like, I was frustrated by because everything I've ever heard about it was how good the directing is, which it is. But also that screenplay was so clearly very good that when you're watching it, I was like, damn, I want to read this screenplay. It's written by Taylor Sheridan, who is also the showrunner, I believe is the correct title, at least creator of Yellowstone.
Wait, is that right?
Yeah. As long as I'm
Everyone's telling me to watch Yellowstone.
Yes. Right.
Yellowstone's this weird thing in America where it's like, isn't it like very massively successful, but like outside of major cities, like a very...
I feel like the whole of Australia is watching it. I don't know anyone in the US.
It feels very Australian.
It's just starting to come in. It's just starting to come in the UK because it's like a Western, right? It's like a.
Yeah, I thought it was super fringe. I was like, oh, Kevin Costner, what are you doing? Like putting him out to pasture. But then apparently, and not only that, but it's good, apparently.
They have 3 seasons of it as well. 5 seasons of Yellowstone.
Spin-offs.
Yeah, and then 2 spin-offs. So it's definitely successful. We're all just out of the loop. But when I was reading up on Taylor Sheridan after that, who is someone I previously didn't know anything about, I just looked him up because I was like, this is so clearly a very good screenplay. It turns out his approach to everything that he's written, which I imagine the pitch of Yellowstone comes into that, was to, write whatever he wanted, is the first pass, and then go through it and say, what are the pieces of this where I'm not doing anything differently to things I've done before? He was like, I didn't try to compare myself to what other people have done before. I try to compare it to what I have done before. Where do I make it very different to everything I've ever done? And I was like, that's a really good standard to hold yourself to, because it can be easy to fall into comforts when creating really anything or pitching anything. But he's like, make my own shit different.
Not only that, but how fearless one would have to be.
Look who it is.
Oh, my God.
Fearless. It's Austin. Can you be here for 8:30, please?
Wow.
You know what Austin's doing differently? Showing up last.
This was all a big trick. This was a big trick. He wanted to see if we do it.
Devil is in the details. I do want to point out, we are looking at a disconnected Mac tower in the back. That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
That's actually been disconnected for years, but just been in my desk here, and I was like, "Why is this using space? It hasn't been functional."
It should go behind me.
Yeah, so you didn't get rid of it.
This is production value. This needs to be in shot. Yeah,
clearing out in stages, guys.
Yep, exactly.
Spring cleaning takes months.
Yep.
What were we talking about?
I don't know.
What were you talking about?
Well, what I was going to say was we were talking about Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
And we're talking about Taylor Sheridan, and
The Taylor Sheridan verse.
Yeah. Ooh, nice.
The fact that the temptation to rest on one's laurels, and also to not, you are doing something different, right? To say, hey, I want to have a Western that is headed by Kevin Costner. Maybe that was the pitch, who knows? Internally, but to go, I'm going to try to do something I haven't done already. When someone goes, well, we just want to make sure that it's got that Taylor Sheridan flair, make sure it has that signature thing that we love so much. Like, I would imagine Craig Mazin is being told that too. Or anybody, Mike White, or anybody who's had something truly successful, if they can adopt that same philosophy of going, I'm not going to do what I did before. That's terrifying.
I mean, he was an actor to start with. And I think is a very good example.
So is Mike White.
Is he?
Mike White has been in stuff. I remember he was in that movie The Good Girl with Jennifer Aniston.
Well, I know that part of what he said about writing Sicario was that years of acting made him allergic to exposition, and it is definitely a screenplay that is written largely without exposition, sort of with the exception of a character who in the movie is very quiet, which is to that character's strength, and was part of why I thought I liked the screenplay so much. And it turns out that the actor was the one who cut some of that, which I find funny, that the actor who wrote Sicario tried to write it without exposition, and then an actor who got cast in Sicario got rid of more exposition.
There's always more to be removed.
It's a whole team.
There's
yeah,
always,
pretty much. And I mean, it's I love cutting stuff. I didn't used to. I think that's probably come from the way I do my job now, is whenever I get to cut anything, I'm like, cool, trim the fat, get rid of it, throw it out.
Writing is sculpture, it's not painting.
It's true.
Man, it's a challenge for me, because typically, like, I have no problems coming in cutting my own dialogue. But if it's something that I've tried to write, or whether it be a script or whether it be music especially, my main problem is every song I've ever written started off on guitar and vocal or piano and vocal and ends up being horns, strings, choir, all sorts of shit. And I agree philosophically with that, and I like aspire to have that mentality of like sculpting, not painting. But by the end of it, it's like this mixed medium, shellacked. And that's why I typically choose to work with other people, is because it's like, hey, I've kind of gone too far down the road.
You need a producer.
I need a producer.
Yeah, it makes sense. So Troy, I wanted to ask you a question, because we were obviously talking about The Last of Us. I don't know how much detail you want to give to the answer to this.
All of it.
Do you feel like the show is significantly different to the games? Are there many departures?
Yes, and then also it's exactly the same. And what I would tell everyone going in, whether you are a fan of the IP or this is a brand new introduction for you, I would say it's not a comparison. It's a companion. And I feel like we've left adaptation behind, and this is now evolution. It is, the game exists. We've told that story. Clearly it's resonated with people. But what if this? And the beauty of it is that it doesn't change the characters, and it doesn't change the story. To have some things play out completely differently. To introduce characters that weren't there before, to iterate on characters that have been, it doesn't change the story. And I think that falling back into the conversation we were having before, as far as where do they fail, is that too many times they're like, it has to be this, or we're not going to do that at all. As opposed to just going, here's the story, we know that it's good, let's try this. The fact that we have a Frank in the show is a huge departure. But when you tell the story right, and you know that you're doing it with excellence, and you just trust that it's going to resonate, that is the difference. But yeah, I mean, Craig talked about one thing, and so I can share this. One of the things that people will see early on, no spores. That existed as a byproduct of the function of the necessity of gameplay.
Mechanic.
Yeah. We don't have that. And Craig's like, if we did that, everybody would be walking around in a mask. He was like, look what we did for the last 2 years. If somebody sneezed, we wore a mask.
It's also maybe like harder for performances when everybody's wearing a mask in terms of like harder.
I bet Pedro was like, I did The Mandalorian way too fucking long.
I'm not wearing a mask.
I just want people to see my fucking mouth.
I can't wait for people to, and the beauty is the result of that, and the what comes of the what if when Craig and Neil start spinning that yarn, man, is just insane. Watching it last night, I was doing it like this because I wanted to see what other people were going to do specifically with moments like that. There are big departures. Like if you're looking for a frame by frame, shot for shot remake, that's not what this is. We don't have to do that. We get to do something completely different.
That always seems ill-advised anyway, because the more you invite direct comparison, the more you're invariably gonna stumble, I feel like. The thing will only succeed to the degree that it asserts its own identity. I think where people get upset with these adaptations is when there's like fundamental departures from what seemingly makes it what it is. Like if it was the temperament of the dynamic between Joel and Ellie, for example, like if that was some wildly different relation, like some ultra loving, really tender, right out at like something that was like nothing's earned, or it would feel like all the matter, all the changes in the world could be fine or could be acceptable. But if certain bedrock principles are treated like they don't matter, then you're in when you're in trouble with at least the people who are loyal to the source material.
I think even to the audience as well, because at that point you're not telling the same story. And I think that most people go into an adaptation not really understanding what the story is. They understand the events, and they understand the character names, and they understand the plot or the premise.
Most games
scenarios
also, like the majority
of a story.
Exactly, I was just saying, most games that have been adapted, the story is far less nuanced and thorough, and like this is a game that always stood above on account of its writing. So
right.
it had such a thoroughly conceived world of characters and things like that. Like you go look at like Sonic movie, what exactly story are they to draw on? Like it gives them, in a way, it gives them a wider berth. Yeah. I'm just saying it's an apples and oranges situation.
Sure.
Because, and that's how most games are. That's why the Uncharted one was a peculiar example, because they had a lot of potential story, and they kind of were like, we're going to do something
kind of
Halo
totally
thing.
Different. Like the Halo show was just seemed really weird to me for this reason, because Halo, first Halo, has a solid narrative to hang your hat on. There's room for adding depth and nuance and characters to it, but like it's a compelling story or structure.
Is it?
No, you don't think so?
I think so.
I think Halo, if you get nerdy about it, has
ODST.
amazing world building. Yeah, there's a lot of depth to that. ODST, Jesus Christ, make a show of that.
ODST be a great show. It's so weird.
Just
I love
cast
Halo.
the Firefly cast and you're assaulting it. All them.
I do too, but I mean, maybe I'm not as much of like a Halo fanboy as some, because I didn't
Lower
have
half of the screen.
Yeah, maybe there's a Mass Effect boy right beneath me. I
pointing
feel
at
like
you're pointing at
I've
my
left all my Halo
not
books
in my world.
downstairs. I've left all my Halo books downstairs. I'm gutted.
Once we started getting kind of more into the derivative aspects of Halo and world building, I think that there were some interesting and compelling things. But what it was based upon, like if you're going to go, well, we got to start. You can't. I guess you can. You can start with ODST if you want to. It's a great standalone. Or like Reach, it's like where do you really start? What is Reach canonical? Halo, right?
Just rock the
it feels like Halo
original game and make an amazing narrative.
I don't know. Maybe there's something about it that I missed. To me, what made Halo great and why so many people played Halo was because of the PvP aspect. It was what.
And I think that was to be fair, I think that was the opinion of the people who made the show. But what's weird to me was Halo.
That was
for
mostly
me,
Halo 2 as well.
Yeah, for me, Halo was the cooperative story campaign with my little sister, and just seeing that big world, like first time you emerge,
getting into Warthog and fucking just going all over.
But the storytelling of it and the it came out in 2001, right? Was it?
Oh,
maybe.
No.
When was the Xbox launch? I feel like that was.
It was definitely like right around 2000 or thereafter.
I remember because it had
Xbox 2001.
Yeah, so it came out around September 11th. There was a lot of that stuff in the news, and this was a story about. but this was the Halo narrative is about religious zealotry and both Halo and Gears of War play with this idea of. This wasn't a good culture. Like the Halo mythos is that this was kind of, if not a fascistic empire of humans beforehand, like it has a certain degree of kind of unpleasantness. Like the Master Chief character is kind of tragic. I'm going to stop before I start talking about the suit, jerking him off. But there is depth there. You could definitely.
I totally think even the perspective of John 117 being the most efficient military equipment ever designed.
What kind of society creates him, right? That's interesting.
Yeah. Pillar of Autumn gets attacked, you end up on an alien planet with the responsibility of saving all of mankind because you are the machine they created to do so, I think is very interesting. The Halo show leans on
aliens,
none
Avatar.
of it.
It's all it's every James Cameron movie basically, much, with a little Paul Verhoeven snuck in, a little bit of Starship Troopers.
But it's all it's also the disfranchising of that hero. It's the disregarding, which I think is a very powerful statement as well. So yeah, maybe there's stuff that I
mean, even then, the fact that his job is to basically protect an AI through the whole thing. Like they're like, hey dude, we made you this machine. Hope that's cool. You were plucked out as a child. Here you go. Protect her.
I will say, like Last of Us, and I think the kind of the aesthetics of Naughty Dog games, Sony first party in general, like definitely lend the aesthetics of it kind of lead your eye more immediately to where you would do an adaptation for television or film, because they are more filmic, they're more cinematic. They're using Last of Us uses a lot of cinematic tricks along with great gameplay, but it uses a lot of cinematic storytelling and cinematic pacing and structure to kind of tell its story. So there is a more direct path, I would say, with adapting one of those stories than with something like Halo, where it's like there's this really great section in the novel that came out 5 years later. You know what I mean? Like there's new. The Last of Us is a very great template. You could show that to someone who never played a game before, and they go, "Oh, I see the TV show in this." I see where this goes.
When they were like, they're turning Cormac McCarthy's book The Road into a movie. I went, what? That's gonna be the script had to be like 13 pages long because there's no dialogue. It's all internal dialogue. I was like, how do you do that? So there's some things that I'm like, don't adapt. And I also push against the notion that now it's going to be real. They're adapting it for TV, or they're turning it into a movie.
Oh yeah,
people need to stop saying that in interviews, then, Troy.
I don't think that it has to. I think that the beauty of like this as an adaptation was if it failed, that proves that this story could not be told in any other medium, and what a great, not necessarily accidental apologist for video games that is, and as a medium. But to me, it just props up the fact that it's a great story, and it can be told here, it can be told there, you can do it in a graphic novel, you can do it doesn't matter. It's a great story. You're going to enjoy it, whether you're on the stick or not. But if you haven't experienced that way, there's a whole other layer of experiencing this world that's waiting for you.
You said, it's funny how talking about the difference between that and Halo, I think this reveals the kinds of interests that we collectively focus on with games that make us probably all of us a bit outliers, in the sense that for me, the number one association with Halo was in college. It was the turning point of frat boys suddenly now thinking it's cool to be into video games. Yeah. Before that, video games were
nerds.
Were for
A
nerds.
motocross helmet on the armor, as I think I've said on the show before, and they create a generation of bro gamers. Yeah, it's inspired.
Yeah. So I think while there is some subset of the Halo, sort of fan base that appreciates the sci-fi, the lore, the characters, the story, the interesting questions it raises. I think to the point that you said kind of offhandedly a second ago, Mike, probably 90% of the people that have kept that financially afloat were people that were really just into the multiplayer and were probably reasonably new to games, which is why I think that the showrunners felt a license to go, no one actually really cares about this story that much. They see it as a fun shooter. Whereas The Last of Us...
I think that's what I find really frustrating about the Halo TV show is they touch on little pieces of it and then just throw them around.
Brand name recognition.
Yeah.
Brand name recognition.
But that's my thing is that's not an interesting pitch to me. Like them, you walking in and going... Sorry,
but you're a creative. You're a creative. And most of the people that you're going to be pitching to are not. Most of the people are pitching to are like, please give us how these work out because I talk like this and do this with my hands for some reason.
I'm not sure. Genuinely, I'm not sure I agree. As someone who has to go into those rooms and pitch to those suits, most of them are nerds. Most of them are into the stuff. They're not bankers. There are those kind of business people behind those people. But generally, when you're pitching to someone who's engaged and interested.
I do believe that the system that has been in place, like if you watch The Offer or whatever, and you see how Gulf Western was in charge of Paramount, because that was just the thing that they were into. That was the whole days of the bean counters. I can speak to experience. The people that are at HBO are incredibly creative and very, very, very passionate. They obviously have to. There's other platforms that are maybe not as creatively motivated as others and maybe a little bit more financially motivated. I'm not going to say who. But I have seen that passion leading model be prevalent at HBO. And I do think that there's people at Disney that are like, look,
they've never put me in a room with kind of a bean counter.
The bean counter?
I think you don't put the creative people in those rooms.
How do you know it's not just that you're so charming that everyone just becomes interested?
He didn't have a shirt on when we started, and I was like,
I didn't. I did up a button when I joined the call with Troy. Exactly. The audience will never see that.
Keep it down.
It's the John Hamm in 30 Rock kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
Is it just that I'm so awesome that I don't realize?
No, you're not John Hamm.
I'm leaving the call now. I'm leaving. No, fair play. I was watching Top Gun the other day. I love that Tom Cruise cast John Hamm as the fuddy Dutch. He's 20 years younger than Tom Cruise, right? I love it. I love that movie. It's such a good movie. I love it.
Wait, in what?
Maverick.
Oh, in Maverick?
I loved it.
It's beautiful as well. Directed by the guy who directed Tron Legacy. So someone whose aesthetic I'm very locked into. And very into. So yeah, it was wonderful.
May I just quickly before we jump off of that?
Well, I was going to jump off on to say that I have watched a bit of The Offer, and I didn't because we had an episode about it, and I've also seen the making of The Godfather now as well. And did you guys like The Offer? I don't remember. I think you did.
I loved it. I found it very Moorish and enjoyable, but it was bullshit in terms of how
it bothers me that it's bullshit. It bothers me that it is effectively a producer being and I did all of this. Where's the whole thing about George Lucas basically forcing him to make the movie because otherwise they'd run out of money? They're like, George Lucas, get him out of here. And it was such an important part of the documentary. So I think I was annoyed by just. Oh yeah. He was like, "Hey, we really need to make money."
They create causality, which is compelling storytelling,
or they credit people incorrectly.
Yeah.
And I just think I found it a little bit frustrating as a result of.
I think I enjoyed it more because my knowledge of the making of The Godfather isn't on that level. It was only after I'd watched it. I did the thing that you always do after watching something like that, and so I'd Googling, did that really happen? And most of the time it's no, it didn't. No,
it's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah.
There's one of the examples that I point out is the how the facts played out is obviously in service to the story that they're telling, but it doesn't mean that those things didn't happen. Bob Evans didn't drive down to Austin to go visit Ally McGraw. It was a phone call, but that's not as moving or compelling than him showing up at her hotel door. So and discovering Steve McQueen on the other side.
My impression from reading about it,
though, it's much more different than that.
My impression from reading about it was because it is written based specifically around what's his name, Miles Teller's
the producer
It's amazing. That you can
like,
tell watching it, right? Like you can tell it's a story written by that character because that character
for sure
is the hero of everything.
Yeah, but I googled after each episode, the kind of highlight claims, and most of them were not things that seemed cut and dry bullshit so much as contested by the various people involved. Like where there's a spectrum of, if there's some coup associated with, pulling off some great thing with the production of it, he kind of gives himself sole credit. Other people argued that it was their job. Reality is it probably was some blurry mixture of overlapping factors. And I didn't get the impression that it was straight up bullshit so much as favorably tilted in his way beyond probably the most purified truth, but that very little seemed whole cloth fabricated. There were a couple things I remember reading that were like, this probably didn't happen at all this way. But most of it's kind of like what Troy's saying, where it was, they played things up.
Here's a question that I have though.
But I don't know. I'm not an expert.
In terms of, did you enjoy it as a show, Alanah?
I had trouble disconnecting those two things. And like I would say I do see it as bullshit. Just because I think maybe part of my problem is that I see it as somebody's personal hero fantasy rather than the actual complications of how this thing was made.
If it was purely fictional, they were making a fictional movie.
Yeah, I think I just had trouble disconnecting the making of documentary.
Because I think that there's, going again to adaptations, my understanding of it was from Bob Evans' perspective, which of course he talks a little bit of a cocaine problem for a while. That's like a footnote. And then, a couple people came to him and was like, get your shit together. But his, like, the kid stays in the picture is his version of that whole thing, and not just a Godfather, but also Rosemary's Baby and everything else he did subsequent. But I think that, so I was looking at it, and I started to do the comparison thing too, and I was like, oh, okay, hold on. That's not the story that we're telling. This is the story that we're telling. And am I on board for that story? And that to me is a thing that kept me from going, well, hold on a second.
I think proximity was probably my issue, was that I was like, let me watch this thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think, the thing I would just throw in there is that what I loved about it so much was that it was basically just a continuous stream of people super passionate about filmmaking.
Right.
And like, as a study of that, completely irrespective of if it's true, I just loved seeing, I'm a real sucker for that sort of subgenre of like, passionate people sort of bending over backwards to try to create the thing. I loved the bit with Coppola and the DP arguing about, if you want me to light them and give you, faces partially in shadow, partially in light, the actors have to hit their marks. And Coppola just screaming, saying, if they're not robots, if you don't give the actors the space to explore the room, they're not going to be able to act appropriately. And he's, well, then I cannot light it the way you're asking. And the way it's like, you have these irreconcilable vantage points because both people want it to be great.
And to both people are right.
Of course, exactly. They are having a hard time giving credence to the fact that the other person has a valid point.
And it is a really interesting thing about the making of The Godfather is that almost nobody wanted to make it. Everybody was against making it. I mean,
or making the worst version of it.
Yeah.
The worst version. Like that key art that they originally had was true. That's not bullshit. I was like, how is that going to be your fucking poster? There's so many things about that they're like, you go 1 degree off and you're a failure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it started with the story, and the story was good. So who knows? Maybe if they had come out with that poster, or if they had gotten different casting, we would have been sitting here talking about how great, who else, the 30 other people that they had for Michael.
Yeah.
Wasn't it originally supposed to be Martin Sheen that was going to be Michael, or that he was going to play Tom? So we could have been lauding their performances. I have no idea.
Mario Puzo, after adapting the screenplay from his own book, obviously, when he went on to write another... when he went
You're not doing this fact, are you? No.
I don't think so. When he went to write
Superman?
another screenplay, he felt...
He wrote Superman.
He did write Superman.
That was his next job.
Well, before writing Superman then, he was insecure about writing screenplays and wasn't sure how to do it, so he read a book on writing screenplays, and it recommended reading the Mario Puzo screenplay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Holy shit.
Which I've actually never read. I really should read that screenplay. Yeah, basically the advice was read your own work, dude. He was like, maybe I am okay. Maybe I can do this.
Here's something interesting, going back to Maverick, because I wanted to.
Love it.
I, as a Christmas present, I gave Travis Willingham is a huge fan. Top Gun is his favorite movie. And so I found a signed script signed by Tom Skerritt to give him. And so he's thumbing through this. He was like, that's not in the movie. That's gone. It was so interesting to see like the different variations. And this was like probably fourth draft, but it was far enough along that character names were in there, and Tom Skerritt had one. So typically, if you have that cast, it's not like he probably was in second round, third round of casting. You're gonna get your big heavy, you're gonna get your main guys, and you're gonna move on. So this had made it through the paces for a while, and versions of the script were like, oof, yeah, you definitely cut all of that, and it changes the characters.
There was
I found that fascinating.
There was a
reading scripts is a great practice, by the way, is what I guess the point.
Big fan.
Yeah, and that exploration of like what gets cut. I saw an example of that just this past weekend that I didn't know about. I was at this event, the Music and Games Festival in Washington D.C., MagFest. And they have this event called like Voice-a-Palooza or something like that, where it's a bunch of voice actors being silly, basically. And they did this one bit where they divvied up all the various parts of the last scene of Wrath of Khan.
There it is.
And had everybody read it. It actually, I thought, felt very SNL-esque because it was a funny idea that was probably twice as long as it needed to be. But they basically had
the explanation of it.
The bit. Well, okay, fair enough. But it was an interesting thing because they read through the final scene, and I never remembered before as Spock is dying in the like radiation chamber thing, and he says. Yeah, they do the whole needs of the many, needs of the few,
friend.
And then you exactly. I am now and will forever be your friend. There's a line in there that I thought was cut because they read it, and I was like, that seems like such a awkward middle where he says something to the effect of, "What do you think of my solution to the Kobayashi Maru?" And I remember thinking that must have because they were reading from what I assumed was a shooting script, and I thought. That had to have been cut.
Did you go back and watch it? Is it there?
I went back. I went back and watched it again, and it is there. He does say that, and it was one of those where I was like, "Wow, it's amazing how that feels like such an inorganic thing to insert. It feels like a quip. It's like a quip too far for this intimate moment in the death of the temporary death of this seminal character." And that I completely erased that from my head. Like, I kind of self-edited that. In his radiation dying voice.
I wonder if it slips through because of the way that it's delivered and that it stood out.
Please pause the podcast now and YouTube that scene from Star Trek II.
Starting at 12 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's not 12 minutes.
I don't know. It was a guess of how you try to get...
Spock dies 12 minutes into the movie.
Exactly.
I mean, he does.
12 minutes and 3 seconds.
Do you know the story behind that?
No, go ahead.
Wait.
So Spock does die about 12 minutes into Wrath of Khan. They do the Kobayashi Maru and he pretends to die. And one of the reasons that scene's in there is because they knew that the fact that he dies in the film would be kind of leaked and talked about by fans. So that scene's purpose back when the film came out was you would watch it and you go, oh, that's what people were talking about when they said that Spock dies in the
No
film.
shit.
And then you carry on with the film. It's a deliberate anti-spoiler technique inserted into the movie.
Wait. So you're saying that a leak or spoiler?
Just conversation, just that it would get out because they knew that the Star Trek audience was very talkative and the fanzine community and the kind of... Well, there was at that point largely women. Like there was a massive. It was what Star Trek was one of the first things that kind of had like a very vocal fanzine pop culture kind of conversation. Well, obviously, well before the internet. That was something that they were very aware of, and they were aware that would lead to that story getting out. So it's deliberately there so that when you get to that scene, you're like, "Oh, it's the bit my friend told me about," and then when it's a joke, you get. Full sense of security.
Kobayashi Maru, though, just if I'm not mistaken, that was that term was introduced in the show first, brought back into.
Well, the scene's there. Like structurally, it's an important thing that narratively it works. The thing I'm specifically referring to is there is Spock during that exercise. Pretends to die, and then he says, "I'm dead, Jim," or something. Right? He's like,
Wikipedia says that. Wikipedia says the first mention of the Kobayashi Maru is in Wrath of Khan.
Oh, cool.
No way.
But it's definitely there for more than just this. It's definitely there thematically.
Because obviously they bring it back. It's a big thing in the new movie with Chris Pine. But was it? I thought that they brought it up in the original series.
It's the one Star Trek show I'm not obsessively nerdly aware of. Otherwise, ask me any other Star Trek trivia I can do it. But I can't do the original series.
We talked about this before. The original series.
No, I come in at Next Gen, and then I'm obsessive.
Can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Can you watch City on the Edge of Forever?
Okay. I feel like I've absorbed most of it through osmosis. That's the one with the big time portal thing, right?
Yes.
Do you know Kobayashi Maru is a reference to Komagata Maru?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. That makes it like
cooler?
Sad? It's based on the actual death of 22 people. For anyone who didn't know at home, the Komagata Maru incident involved the Japanese steamship Komagata Maru, on which a group of people from British India attempt to immigrate to Canada in April 1914, but most were denied entry and forced to return to Budge, Calcutta. There, the Indian Imperial Police attempted to arrest the group leaders. A riot ensued, and they were fired upon by police, resulting in the deaths of 22 people.
Yep.
That is what Kobayashi Maru is named after, based on.
Not the biggest human tragedy that Star Trek has referenced, but definitely.
Which one?
All right, go ahead.
Biggest probably 9/11.
Push your glasses.
There you go. Because the series Star Trek Enterprise, following 9/11, second time it's come up, both times brought up by me. What Enterprise has, it's like Florida gets blown up by aliens, right? That's in Enterprise, like the next season, and then there's like a war on terror in Enterprise where they go, and the Xindi, if I recall correctly, are this alien species they're hunting down, and I'm getting bored as I'm describing this myself.
No, I love hearing people talk about the plot of Star Trek that I don't
know. It's sad how much of my teenage brain was dedicated to just learning all this trivia. It's ridiculous.
Why? Was there just a desire for the knowledge, or did you find it useful? Like, were you like, I need to learn about this?
Well, I think the chicken and the egg are the other way around. I got really obsessed with it because it was an interesting and, as a nerdy kid, somewhat kind of
hyperfixation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's not diagnose me on the call, but definitely like an interest in kind of becoming obsessively aware of things. The world building of that and how consistent Star Trek is. Star Trek has loads of contradictions in it, but like more so than most pop culture, it's incredibly like it works logically, the chronology, etc.
I feel like
that got me into it, and I do think one of the reasons as an adult that I've gone into writing and specifically the world building side of writing is that childhood interest. I think that's definitely part of it.
I think that I know that I do this. I will embellish my passions, or I will seek the tools necessary to increase my capacity for my passions. So if there's something I'm really passionate about,
I just follow.
I have two comments, and then I unfortunately have to run, despite the fact that I was egregiously late.
Egregiously.
We're not wasting your time, are we, Austin?
Sorry, busy.
So sorry to keep you.
Sorry, Austin.
I was indeed. I want to. If you guys are able to get a hold of your like end of year Steam stats next week.
Mine's all over the map, by the way.
That's why I'd rather save it for next time. I'm just planting a seed.
Steam game in the last year, so mine are going to be very boring.
Is it yours?
Okay.
And it was Thomas Was Alone.
Work in progress.
I play it every day. At the end of the day, I'll just boot up Thomas Was Alone.
Just like turn
Sorry,
the lights
honey,
down low, pour yourself a drink.
Gotta sit down and watch some more Thomas Was Alone.
I'm obsessed with it. I keep pitching
BoJack.
TV channels. I'm just like, this is it. Like, you thought Last of Us was good? Thomas Was Alone, man. Let's do it.
Sorry, what was your
BoJack constantly watches BoJack on that show.
That's true. I love that show.
The sadness of that is so good.
It's underrated.
It's truly amazing.
It's I've watched it multiple times.
Me too.
Like, it's
brilliant. Like, and I know that everybody I know that everybody says that, but I still feel like it's underrated. You know how sometimes you're like, this is actually rated quite well, and everyone who likes it really likes it, but I still feel like it doesn't get the justice it deserves.
I got a little punchy. That. People still refer to like Thomas Was Alone as underrated, and it's brilliant because
nobody says that.
I promise you, they do all the time. Shut up, it's me.
But I got a little punchy.
Like, it's cool. People keep talking about things. The worst thing to be is like fine.
Yes.
You want to be one end or the other.
Yep.
You want to be memorable or not.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was all right.
Yeah. I got a little punchy at an event, and somebody came up and they were like, "I know everybody hates Last of Us Part 2." I was like, "Who? Who hates it?"
Oh, you went Margaret Thatcher on them.
Were you being
people? Where and why?
I'm saying people hate it. I was like, I saw more than the first game. I don't know who hates it.
That is fully Margaret Thatcher.
Give me their names.
What does punchy mean? Do you meant that you drank punch or you were boxing?
I was just, it was...
Put them up.
I was just a little rough around the edges.
Let's just say
I was a little frazzled.
It's a good thing that Italy is a non-extradition country. Yeah. Not welcome back there.
Yeah.
Austin, what was your second note?
The second note was when you were talking about getting into the sort of nerdy deep dives. A game that I just wanted to randomly shout out. Nerdy Deep Dives, by the way,
was a great game, or it was a great band in the early 2000s.
It was both.
They opened for Wilco.
A band inspired by a game.
Album art, yeah.
I played a zillion games in December as part of the Dice jury, and the one that got its hooks in me was get out of here. The one that got its hooks in me for exactly that reason, Mike. I loved the like as a way to do sci-fi world building in a totally different way was Shipbreaker. Did you play that?
I didn't. I know I need to. I've got a few mates who worked on it. I do need to check that out.
It's so I found it inexplicably addicting, but the idea that you learn about the world by what you learn about these ships in order to take them apart. Yeah. That's it.
One of my friends is obsessed with Shipbreaker. Like she brings up Shipbreaker so often that I feel like it's required playing at this point.
Angela called it unpacking for dudes.
Is it like a session gamer like kind of thing where it's like you're gonna sit down, you're gonna play like a round kind of thing, or is it
the individual missions tend to be 15 minutes, so it's really perfect. Really good in and out, but I just found it just like endlessly engrossing. The idea
it's the same as Power Wash Simulator. You learn about the world during the power washing, and like there's an example of like the mayor of the town is kind of a shit, but you sort of learn that at the point where
you
exactly
and theme.
BioShock movie. Why
we've come full circle, everyone.
You go to Power Wash's house, which has been egged. But he won't open the gate for you because he doesn't want you to enter the house. So the level is that you have to power wash the eggs off the mayor's house, but he won't actually let you on the premises. I'm like,
somebody got really high, made that game.
It's really good. I love it.
But that is the kind of thing I mean, though. That is the kind of like that is precisely, what I don't know. To me, it was a game that of all the ones that I played, that was the one that I just kept coming back to, and I was like, I know I have others to do.
I think I just kind of want to keep playing. I think that's why I haven't played it. It does sound really good because I got so obsessed with Power Wash Simulator that I don't need more of those games.
Yeah. Tenement, should I keep playing that?
Oh, I loved it. How far through
are you?
Still on the train in the opening.
It's funny because
that's a first episode deep cut. That's amazing.
Literally the first episode.
You're referencing the first episode of the show.
Forgot about that. That was
4,000 episodes ago.
God.
That's a reward for the audience member who's really.
We started this show in
in.
2019.
I know.
I think
I've gained a beard and glasses and several grey hairs since then. So
it's been a long time.
I've aged like
Happy
20 years since
2023.
our first episode.
I saw Cameron last night, and I was afraid he was going to call me out for some reason, thinking that he like watches this or that he knew that, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I love playing The Last of Us." I was waiting for the other shoe to drop to be like, "You need to finish the game."
I'm gonna text him and tell him right now. You know, Troy never got off
dude.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Cameron. You never got off the train.
Never got off the train.
And I never got off the train. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Happy 2023. And we will see you next week, hopefully. I'm
Do you get an intro or what?
I'm doing it right now. Troy, shut up. That's
sorry.
Troy Big.
You're in the intro right now.
Shut up, Mike. I'm doing it right now. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. That's also Winter. He's a video game composer. This is Play, Watch, Listen. We will see you next week.
Maybe.
Maybe.